Good evening, everybody. My name is Griffiths, and I'm hosting this webinar along with Vicki Griffiths, colleague within this webinar group. As this year began, the world went into something of a spasm where we ended up with a lockdown. And we looked at what are the lessons that we can learn from this period of a lockdown. Things changed rapidly over a day-to-day basis. The team, and I'll introduce the team in a moment, began by looking in March of what effects the lockdown was having on the P3M community. But we soon realized that things were moving at such a pace and changing at such a pace that anything that we were able to put together would be outdated within days of us putting it together. To that end, we changed direction slightly, and instead of saying how is it affecting people within lockdown, it's what are the lessons that we can learn from the lockdown? What can we take forward from here? That was the team that got together, myself, Tim Lyons, Vicki Griffiths, who will be speaking later on, and Sarah Coleman. Unfortunately, Tim and Sarah are tied up today and can't join us here on this, but we have had a number of calls and chats and iterations of what's going on, and we put together a series of blogs that have been published. I have to please emphasize that this was not a research project. It was purely sort of thoughts, ideas, stories that we had gathered throughout this lockdown period. And these are all available through the MPA website. There are 3 in italics at the bottom there because there was people from outside of our core 4 put an application in. Dan Connors from the Applied Influence Group, Wendy Shooter, who many of you will know from Unicorn Consulting, and Rahana Kazemi from Women in Project Management in Iran. So we won't be going into those in any detail today, but what we will be doing is showing you the link to all of those. Before I go any further on, I'm just going to ask Vicki if she'd give us a quick 2 minutes or introduction of herself on that one.
Right, good evening, everyone. I'm Vicki Griffiths. I'm a senior project manager working in the offshore geotechnics industry. I'm also this year's chair of the Women in Project Management SLIG. And when the original call came out for this from Sarah, we were looking at developing what we could take and what we can learn from this. My own particular interest is in things on innovation and creativity, so naturally we jumped at the chance to do this. So I hope that this will be of interest to you all. Yeah.
Thanks, Vicki. The introduction, and Sarah has written a very lengthy introduction which is available on the website, and we won't go through all of that today. But in essence, it was how have people coped during this lockdown? What can they learn from this lockdown? It's interesting to note that in 2019, only about 30% of people worked from home, and that's from the Office of National Statistics. And if we were to do that today, I think we'd find a significantly higher number of people working from home. And of course, we're now into the situation where they want us to go back to work, but they don't want us to go back to work, but they want us to go back to the office, but they're not quite sure about us going back to the office. So there's this dilemma going on at the moment. A lot of organizations are also looking at what else in the past they've always said working from home wouldn't work for them as an organization. Having been forced to do into working from home for their staff, have now realized that there are significant benefits from having some of their staff working from home. Reduction in the rental or lease that they have to make for large office complexes in major cities being one of them. There is also an environmental issue where you've got less people traveling to and from in cars and trains and buses, etc. So there's an environmental issue there. So we looked at the perspective of the individual and the organization and what that was going to them and how that was going to work. What can we take from that we've learnt in this period of time and continue to learn, and what can we take into the future? What can we carry forward? What lessons can we take forward? to plan our future, not just as individuals, but also as an organization. I know that APM have been working from home an awful lot, and I'm no doubt that they're going through very similar as most organizations. How can we make the difference going forward? What are the positives that we can take forward on this? And there are a number, and we'll go through some of them today. And what are the negatives that we've noticed on that? Now, some people you talk to say working from home is fantastic. It gives me more family time, etc. I don't have to go out. I don't have to get up in a suit and tie and go out to work. I can work from home. I don't have to do the 1 hour or 2 hour commute into central London and fight through the turmoil of the underground. Others are saying, no, it doesn't work for me because there's too many distractions. I like the interaction of fellow colleagues. So there are issues there, and positives and negatives that we can look at on all of that. And I would suggest that you look at the link that we've put on there, majorprojects.org, and the MPA and the blog. And we're very thankful for Jonathan Norman, who has fielded all of these blogs for us and published them on the MPA website. The first one that we looked at was lessons from collaboration. And when you look at the dictionary, you look at the definition of a collaboration, it's working with other persons or group in order to achieve or to do something. That's great, that's fine. But we have collaboration in the workplace where colleagues are working together and they're working together for the benefit of the organization. But there's that collaboration where you're chatting around the coffee pot, or you're chatting around the kitchen or the water cooler, or you just chat across the desk, and that sort of collaboration. And that disappeared to a greater extent as the lockdown hit and people were instructed to work from home. So there was that issue with collaboration. You can't just pop across to somebody's desk and say, I'm stuck here, give me an idea. You've either got to phone them or you've got to set up some form of visual get together and group, and it's never that easy. We've also got collaboration with our customers, and how do we collaborate with them? I mean, I'm currently working for Oxlep here in Oxford. I can't go out to see our clients and our customers, so we're having to talk to them through virtual media, through telephone calls, through emails. And that's never as easy as it is to go out and talk to them on site as to the issues that they're having with their projects on site. So there is a problem with that, and we have to have a look at that. But the other one that came about was collaboration with competitors. Now, that seems strange to me when I first read about this and thought about this, collaboration with competitors. And what came to me on that one was the Royal Mail, who deliver our post on a daily basis, and bless them, they're very regular and they come along. But we've also got a whole host of other delivery organizations, UPS, etc., Hermes, all delivering to our doors. Now, what I wasn't aware of at the time was there's all of those organizations, whilst in essence competitors to each other, actually got together and said, look, we've got to protect the public here and our own staff. So instead of us all turning up at the doorstep at the same time, why don't we arrange time slots where each of these delivery organizations will deliver into a specific area, and thereby minimizing the risk of 3 or 4 of these turning up in the same street at the same time. So I thought that was exceptionally well worked. It's not been publicized very much, but a real move forward of working with competitors. I think the other great example of collaboration that came out on this was the fact of putting together the Nightingale Hospital in London. When all of this broke, and it was quite early, there was a briefing on the 24th of March, on the 21st, 22nd of March. Planners and the NHS staff and the military all visited the Excel Centre in London to see if it could be turned into an NHS hospital for the outbreak. The plans for that hospital weren't announced until the 24th of March. And by the 7th of April, a mere 18 days, they were actually taking patients into that hospital. Now, here we had the NHS, we had the armed forces, and we had the contractor all working in collaboration with each other to make this happen. Undoubtedly, they all had their ideas of what wanted to be done and how they should do it, but they put their silos to one side and worked very much together to get all of that in place so that we could actually have people being treated very, very quickly. So what's the results of all of that is cooperation with each other, a willingness to work together, clarity of purpose, and a building of relationships throughout all the organizations, individuals, and people. I would suggest that perhaps a different definition of collaboration in today would be laying aside one's differences and breaking down of silos and adopting an open-minded approach to seek the best solution. I'm now going to ask Vicki if she will take over.
Thank you very much, Jim. Okay, go on to the next slide, please. So again, going back to a definition of resilience, what is it? Okay, we've got returning to an original shape or position after deformation. Okay, so that's a thought for going on. What does that mean? We're project managers. Change is our business effectively. If we do our job right, we bring about change through the projects that we do. So it's about more reformation rather than returning back to its original shape after deformation, assuming we've done our jobs correctly. So, okay, as project managers, how can we reinforce some of these changes we're doing effectively when working remotely? We said the world changed completely at the beginning of lockdown. How do we do this? We've resorted to things like virtual meetings and signing documents virtually and e-signatures and having to work in being socially distant. But as human beings, we're very social animals. So how do we deal with all of these things when normally we're used to talking to people face to face, and we are, again, when we talk to people face to face, we read people's body language. We're social creatures, and some people are quite happy to be sat at home in their office or at their kitchen table and things like that. Some people really are struggling with all of these changes that they've had to make, and the resilience part of it is sort of like how our coping mechanisms with how we've managed to deal with these things. Some have gone on for like, yeah, this is fine, I love it, I love working from home, and some they miss the social aspect of being in the office. And part of one of the things that's come out through all of this is, with our social distancing and things like that, is also how it's affecting our mental health and things like that. But we're just saying that, are we able to bounce back? So we're talking about resilience again, returning to the original shape. But is that original shape now fit for purpose? Is that original shape going to now need to be a new shape? So instead of resilience, we also need to be flexible and adaptable. In our working environment, as project managers, things have changed massively. The market for services has changed. Some clients have been downsizing. Many businesses have been sort of like putting projects and thoughts on hold almost, just to see how the world is changing, where it's good to invest in their money. Some companies, my own for example, would prefer to keep money internally rather than spending externally. So again, the market for how people are working together and downsizing is changed significantly. So the market shape, part of what we're going to do is assess the market shape. Sectors have changed sometimes massively. And as I said, with spending power, do we want to spend money, or more accurately, do you want to spend money right now? Do I want to wait and see what happens to monitor what's going on around us? So it's not just on a personal level with resilience and how we manage to work together and carry on in this new normal, but it's also for our businesses. They're trying to also work out how to do this. For example, also if you're a project, you're a freelance project manager, things like that, or you're a consulting one, you may not be able to go back into markets that you've traditionally worked in, but perhaps doing other things with voluntary networks. Yes, it's a loss leader, but you can build skills and other contacts and become more sector savvy. You've been seeing some things over the course of lockdown, so the furloughed here and the furloughed life groups and things online, where taking people who've been put on furlough and getting them to volunteer and you move their skills and use their skills in other sectors during the time of lockdown. So I was talking about the neurology of the workplace and the organisation and the project with that part of it. We, as Ian said at the beginning, sort of like we always before we'd had working from home, and you sort of like say, oh no, we don't do that very much. Maybe very 30%. No, we don't do that a lot. It wouldn't work with what we're doing. But now, after all of these things, after the world has changed, you ask some people, think, yeah, we can still achieve what we want to. Our values are still the same, but our belief, yes, we can do this from working from home. Yes, we can do this. Some of those have changed over the time of lockdown, where we've had to explore, do our beliefs actually fit with the current things? Our capabilities and environment has been changing so much. As Ian has already said, if we were writing about what's been happening throughout lockdown, we'd be writing new stuff every single day, because everything has changed so fast over the lockdown period. And certainly the change in remote working, I think it's been shown that in a lot of cases it is working. So is remote working going to become a new thing for the future? We're talking all about developing all our processes and capabilities and things, but it's all about the behaviours. As I said, there's been a lot of focus on just sort of like our mental health, keeping sane, because it's very difficult for people sometimes. Change and uncertainty, going through the change curves, it can be very hard to sometimes stay sane and things. But then asking questions, staying curious, and that's also important, particularly on the next piece I'm going to talk about with creativity and innovation. How can we do things differently? How can we do things? But also to stay polite. We're all working together in difficult circumstances. So working together and staying polite and collaborating, again, as Ian has just been saying, is really important with our resilience and how we get through these things. So if we talked about the new normal, working about are we going to return back to our original shape, or are we going to reform into a different shape that will help us move forward in the world post-lockdown? Next slide, please. So I said then, I'm building on that, there's lessons in innovation and creativity. You may have heard the expression, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think this lockdown has really proved this one. The world effectively changed when we said, right, you have to go into lockdown. Lots and lots and lots of questions came up. How can my business, how can my project adapt to what is going on around me? The initial first part of it was getting many IT professionals, trying to enable as many staff as possible to work from home. So that involved, have we got enough hardware? Have we got the right software, antivirus, and all of those sorts of things. And I know at the beginning, the IT teams were effectively working all hours to try and get the large organisations being able to operate effectively from home as quickly as possible. So there was a lot just to even just move from that mindset of you work in the office through to, nope, now you're working at home and you have everything you need ready so you can continue working from home. Once you've got all the hardware sorted, the next question is, oh my goodness, how am I going to maintain my project momentum? I don't get to go and talk to my team. I don't have the face-to-face meetings that I normally have. Oh my goodness, how can I deal with it? I work with a lot of people who are geographically dispersed, so a lot of my team are in Holland and things. So some of these things didn't make a huge change for me, but for others where we work together as a team in one geographical location, being spread apart and using teams has made things a little bit more difficult because of having to get used to using Teams or Zoom or GoToMeeting or whichever platform you've chosen to use. How can you effectively get keep your team up to date and moving forward with the project? And we've all found our own little ways, but also making sure that we keep that human part of being in touch with our teams. So like, are you all right? Is everything okay? And moving forward that way. Those of us who, the supermarkets, for example, they can't send all their people home. They still have to actually continue supplying goods and services. And the supermarkets vitally important because they're there. We need them to feed the nation, but we have to also keep both employees and also the general public, their customers, safe while they're doing this. So it's just like, oh my goodness me, what's the best way to be able to do this? So looking at how numbers of people allowed in the shops, social distancing. Overnight almost you saw little lines along the shop floor, so saying this is 2 meters, you must stay away from each other from that part of things. Also trying to look at the supply chains. I don't know about you, but when at the start of lockdown, pasta and things like yeast became almost impossible to buy because of the changes to the supply chain. So it's trying to work out how can we keep these essential things moving forward. So it was using techniques like you may only buy 1 or 2 of these essential items, or also limiting times for particular people to be able to use the shops. So there was lots of things being thought about and lots of things that, as it all continued through lockdown, to improve things. Other companies are thinking, how can we bring our offering online? And for Amazon, I think has been busy as anything throughout the course of the lockdown, because everyone has resorted to ordering things online. Whereas, say, more smaller local businesses, this is much more difficult for them. Is there a way we can move things online so it allows me to at least maintain some sort of trade when working forward? And others who are looking at what they normally would manufacture is like, there's not much call for that. Maybe I can retool to manufacture essential supplies for the NHS and for other parts of the country. So answering the call of the Prime Minister saying we really must have more ventilators or we need more PPE. So again, there was a lot of things of how we can help the country moving forward. So the questions start from basic survival through to, okay, what can we do to support things? And yeah, there was a lot of great examples moving on things. So the NHS, as has already been mentioned, with the Nightingale hospitals in collaboration with the military to get these up and running as fast as is possible. 18 days to get a hospital fully up and running, whereas you wouldn't think that would normally be possible under normal circumstances. But yet they did this. Necessity was definitely the mother of invention in that case. And some of the brand names that you're more familiar here with, like Barber and Burberry, sort of like fashion designers and so those things, they've been retooling some of their factories to produce non-surgical gowns and face masks and so forth to help the NHS and other people. Dyson, as I previously mentioned, answered the government's call to produce more ventilators. And they went from a blank sheet of paper to be able to design to a full design of a ventilator. And it's not just Dyson who is doing this. Many other companies have retooled in different ways to produce these essential bits of equipment that we've needed throughout lockdown. Also gone into something a bit more local. Down where I live, things like Cornish pasties are very important, but they're also usually very local businesses, so family-run affairs. And our local shop was literally faced with the consideration of, well, if I can't have customers in the shop, but if I don't have any customers, I'm going to go out of business. So they looked at other things. So what they ended up doing was going on local Facebook pages and things and advertising frozen pasties to be delivered. Also things like the local veg shops and things who normally delivered to hotels. These businesses were now shut. There was no one going to the hotels and restaurants. So they were looking at, okay, how can I sell to the general public? So they again adapted what they were doing to to fit the circumstances. It was evolve or become extinct, effectively. Others, another local business with Tarquin's Gin, changed their skills towards making hand sanitizer. So again, that change in direction, that ability to pivot, has really shown a real spirit of innovation in the country. As I said, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think the question I have on this one is, we've developed all of these creative and new ways of doing things, and we've had to, because, as I said, necessity is the mother of invention. But once the necessity is gone, how do we make sure we maintain the spirit of innovation going forward? And that's one of the key questions I have coming out of lockdown. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to hand you back to Ian to talk about lessons on risk and decision making.
Thanks, Vicki. The question that we have here is that just how lucky are we feeling? Anybody of my age bracket will remember the Dirty Harry movies and Clint Eastwood, and are you feeling lucky today? We have to recognize that there's been a degree of disruption, challenge, existing ways of working has gone, the work stimulus has gone, and it's prompted a renewal on all of that we're doing. It's interesting that the government carried out a hypothetical simulation exercise on the H2N2 flu pandemic in the UK in 2016, and that they built all of their results into the National Risk Register. That said that we were the second best prepared country for something like this, but just behind the USA. But you look back at how the pandemic has been handled in the UK, and there are two sides to every story, and some will tell you the government haven't been very proactive and been very, very careful in doing it, and others will tell you that they've made the best use of information provided. The project management community, when we're in projects, we can only make decisions based on the information that we have at the time. And sometimes that will be a good decision, and sometimes it will be a less than good decision. But it's not done deliberately, it's done based on the information that we have at the time. So that was an issue that is still facing the country today. And the question is, how lucky do we feel? A lot in the news today about rises and increase in the pandemic and the cases. My eldest son has just been put back into lockdown in South Wales because of the rise in numbers down there. On the project side, have we had to accelerate projects, cancel projects, reschedule projects? I was involved with a project in the local church, a grade 1 listed church, nearly 1,000 years old. We've done a large renovation project when the pandemic hit, and we had to delay the project ongoing for a number of months because we couldn't get the workforce to come in to the building to do it. We've had to reschedule, and fortunately it's now finished. But how do we view risks? Do organizations have an increased risk appetite? Sometimes not comfortably doing it, but realizing the situation that we're in. The problem is, are they accelerating through the decisioning process? New ways of making decisions, dare I say, cutting corners? Have they got line of sight events? Or they got a planning horizon or a shorter? What's the cultural attitude towards risk in today? And how do we keep the show on the road? There's a lot going on about, can we fly to Europe for holiday, and if we do, what is the risk of having to do a 14-day isolation program when we come back, or not, as the case may be? How lucky do we feel about going across and doing these sort of things? Zoom fatigue is an issue that has crept into an awful lot of people. I know people that are on Zoom meetings or other types of virtual meetings for 8 or 9 hours a day, and having to make informed decisions during those meetings, which sometimes, if you're Zoom fatigued, you haven't had time for a break, a refresh. Sometimes the decisions are not necessarily the strongest ones that are made. Time pressure doesn't mean taking more risk at work. We come back to the collaboration. Can we not talk to people so easily to air ideas and thoughts and processes and realize the areas of error within them or areas that need reinforcing? So that's another issue that we've got. I've no doubt that decisions taken now will, whenever possible, be revisited in the new normal, or sometimes there's somebody tells me it's not going to be a new normal, it'll be a different normal. A lot of people are getting upset about the word normal because I don't think there is a normal out there at the moment for us. Everything is changing on a daily basis. In your projects, I would ask you, what risks are you having to take based on what is happening with the pandemic? Have you put everything on hold so that you don't take a risk? Or is there an appetite for risk within the organization to be ahead of the game as we come out of this pandemic? And that's what I would ask for you on this risk and how lucky we might feel that we are. I'm going to ask Vicki to have a look now at the psychodynamics of being on the call.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. I think we may be spending an awful lot of time on conference calls and things like that, and Zoom fatigue certainly can become a real thing. I know that I was one of those people spending 8 hours a day on Teams calls, and they've heard by death by PowerPoint, but I was thinking death by Teams may now become a thing. So how can we, if we're using this, if we're spending all our time in these virtual meetings, how can we make it more effective in what we do and how we communicate? Next slide, please. So conferencing, a video conference, is not the same as a meeting. You go into a meeting, you can very quickly get sort of almost like a feeling for the room and all that thing. So there is a lot of textual information that you have when you're meeting a group of people in person that you miss out with when you're conferencing, because you are limited to a small amount of space on a screen. You don't get to almost feel some of the mood music that you would have if you were in a meeting. So yeah, no, it's definitely not the same thing. Move on, please. Sorry. And it's looking at what is the weakest link in what you're doing when you're presenting on a conference, part of it. So there's and the next part of this presentation will go through some of the different links that are involved. Yes, please. Making sure how you're going to be perceived. When you're perceived in a meeting, it's very clear and easy to understand how, well, it's a lot clearer to how you're being perceived, and you can read from the people that you're talking to how you are being perceived. At the moment, I'm just talking to a monitor on a laptop, and it's very difficult to get that feedback part of it. So there are things that you can do to help bring yourself across in the best way possible. Yes, please. So the quality of your connection. So at the beginning of lockdown, or just before lockdown, I was very lucky. I decided to upgrade all my broadband, and I'm so thankful that I did, because the quality of your connection can make a real difference to how you come across in your meetings. Because at poor quality, you will end up your speech will end up breaking up like this, and it will be difficult. Also, speaking as a parent, if you have your children at home and they're all upstairs hogging the bandwidth playing Fortnite, then it also makes it a little difficult, when you're in your meeting sometimes. So it's worth making sure you've got a good quality broadband connection for working at home to do all of these things. Your audio, again, because your voice, particularly in this one where there is no video on this one, your voice is the only way you're going to be bringing over your argument and things like that. There's also a lot of, in a meeting, you'll have a lot of potentially the chatter. If more than one person is speaking at a time, it makes it really difficult to understand what is being said. So making sure that you have the sort of like the right rules and things in place to sort of like who is going to speak next, maybe raising your hand, your virtual hand, so that you can make it much easier to be understood. And again, if others are speaking, you ask others to mute so that you get that better quality of audio, bringing your message across. Your video as well, things like making sure you have a good enough bandwidth, again, to make sure your video is good. But also what you're showing in your background is also quite an important thing. If you could see my room at the moment, you would see an awful lot of books and bookshelves and things related to chinchillas. So that one you might want to use something to blur the background so you can't see what is going on behind you. Because if you're working in, say, a kitchen, is that the image you want to project to whoever you're talking to on the audio? So it's looking at all of these different things to see what you are presenting through your video as well as through your audio. Last bit there. And your message, making sure that your message is very clear what you want to deliver. So if you're presenting like this one, I spent most of today going through this, making sure that I was very clear on the message I was going to be delivering to you today, because this is my opportunity to do this, and I want to make sure it's a little limited in that you don't see my body language, you won't see all the things that I would in a meeting that you would normally pick up on. So my message has to be really clear, so that you when you walk out of this, you know what I was trying to tell you. So again, picking out what is your weakest link in your conferencing and things like that, making sure that your connection is good, your audio is good, your video is good, and your message is very clear, so you can pass it on. But you cannot not communicate. I forget exactly what percentage it is, but so much of your communication comes not just through your voice, but also through your body language. It's a really high percentage, I think something like 80%. So it's even through just moving your hands and things, you can communicate so much more to the people around you. But it also is what signals are you giving off during a meeting? Are you showing that you're interested? Are you bored? All of those sorts of things. So it's just also bearing these tips in mind to make sure that you are again presenting the right thing in your meetings, because also many of these sessions are recorded, so you may be caught on camera when you're doing these things. So this could either work for you or for other people, but it can also be quite strongly caveated, because if you know a person quite well, then you'll probably be able to read their body language quite easily. Somebody you don't know quite so well, you may misinterpret some of the things. But you can see general things. Are you engaged or disengaged? Normally people, they lean in, they're engaged, or leaning back. Nah, I'm not really that interested, not that engaged. In my case, leaning forward is sometimes trying to read small words on the slide, but again, so it can be open to misinterpretation. But are you fidgeting and things like that? Are your body language closed? You've got your arms crossed and things like that? Or you're quite open to seeing what's going on? What are you projecting when you do these things? Next piece, please. Are you interested? So again, sort of like nodding at salient points in the presentation, things like that. Are you bored? Can you be seen there, sat there, leaning back, playing on your mobile phone, answering text messages and doing things like that? That does come across as, yep, this person is totally bored with what they're saying. Or fidgeting. Now that could also be, yeah, I've just got a really uncomfortable chair, but sometimes it does indicate that you're not that interested in what's being said. Agreeing or disagreeing in meetings and things, you'll sort of be nodding your head. But if you're doing it too much, you look a little bit like the Churchill dog in the back of the car sometimes. So again, just making sure that when you use your body language, you're using it to the right effect. Looking up or looking down. So looking at the way people what the direction that people's eyes go. Sometimes if they look up to the left, they're remembering images, or looking up and to the right means they're constructing images in their mind. So it could be that. Again, this is slightly caveated because some people all people are different, but looking at how people's eyes are can also help work out what you're thinking or what you're saying. The hardest part with this one, look into my eyes. Obviously, when you're talking to your computer monitor, you're focusing on the screen, but what you're seeing, if you're looking into someone's eyes, you should be looking at the camera on the top, and then you can't necessarily see that part of it. But if you say, for example, have a dual screen, I have 3 screens set up in front of me at the moment, it makes my life so much easier when working. But if I have one of my screens up there that I'm looking at when I'm talking to you, but the camera is coming from my laptop, it just looks like I'm not paying attention. I'm not looking into your eyes and seeing what's going on. So again, just using these little tips and body language can be helpful. You can also use body language for emphasis. I mean, a great example of that is you're watching politicians on TV. I think if Boris Johnson sat with his hands, he might be speechless because he's always using his hands for emphasis and using timing and body language to really bring across his point and positioning his body. So he'll dart forward or be chopping motions with his hands when he's trying to indicate deadlines going to one, or in levels using horizontal motions, moving along the things up. And sometimes it can also pause and freeze, just almost as a visual full stop. It feels really odd when you do it first, but it can really bring your point across much more clearly. And again, if you watch politicians on TV, you can see a lot of this body language and trying to bring that in to what you're doing. But it's also really important to be staying alert, because when you've got this, it almost looks like the Muppet Show when you've got everybody as pictures on there, and you're trying to read body language of 9 people or more on the screen in front of you. And it's really difficult to be able to read all of that body language at once because you're looking at a snapshot of each of these people. So it's quite hard, and you have to watch like a hawk, which why you can sometimes get quite exhausted after a day of Zoom calls or Teams meetings. It's also really important, if you're the moderator, making sure you give a bit of space to the introverts. The extroverts will always want to speak up and say what they think, but it's also making sure, just like in a regular meeting, that you make sure that there's space for those who are less extrovert and giving them the space to be able to speak, because they may have some really good points to bring to the table. Also use the chat sparingly, because while you can use the chat to have a little side conversation perhaps, you're then not necessarily focusing on what's being said on the call. It also may look like you're not paying attention, not interested, things like that. And also sometimes the chat can be recorded as part of it. So again, be careful with what you say with your chat. But it's these little tips and tricks can help you hopefully to make the most of these meetings. I've come to the end of the main sessions that we've got. There were some other areas that we looked at, which we're not going to dip in necessarily too much this evening, but are really worth having a look at on the blogs.
Thanks, Vicky. We're conscious of time, and we have a number of questions coming in. These slides, they don't go into any detail, but they are available on after this webinar, and the link for the blogs that they are associated with is available on the MPA website, and the link for that is on this webinar as well. So what I'm going to do now is just to have a look and see what we have in the way of questions. I've got one here. With locate lockdowns the new norm, how do we effectively assess risk? Risk is always one of those difficult areas to formulate, in that how do we assess risk? I mean, what I do now with the projects that I'm involved in at the moment is, as best as we can, talk to the people on the receiving end, the people on the delivery, and anybody that might be in between, and just find out where their appetite is at the moment. Do they have an appetite for risk, or are they worried about it? And then when we go into, or we come out of the pandemic, there is a real danger that if we come out of the pandemic, that risk will disappear very rapidly, and people will say, we don't need to do that now, we can get on with life as it was in 2019. And that may bring something else back in that we don't want. So there's a great deal of thought process that's got to go into, as we're in lockdown and we're out of lockdown, what risks do we take? What are sensible risks to take? How do we categorize those risks? How do we mitigate those risks? And what is the impact of those risks on A, the organization, and B, the populace that they might affect? So hopefully that will be helpful. That was the only real question that we had in. If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation and for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to get in touch with us through the APM if we can be of any assistance in the future for you in any way at all. And look out for more presentations and webinars through the APM, which will be on the events page. I'd like to thank Vicki for her involvement in this today. In absenteeism, thank Sarah and Tim for their input, and for the others who have had an input into this who were not able to join with us today. So thanks to everybody, and thank you all very, very much, and we hope to speak again soon.